Hi, my friend. Welcome back to Healing Together, a video channel that is dedicated to telling God stories and testimonies of how God works in our lives so that we can find healing and encouragement and we can see how God really will bring us out the other end of some struggles that we might be having in our lives. If you remember back on Tuesday, when we listened to Joe and Sara tell us about the beginning of their lives, their growing up years, the homes they came from, the jobs they had. You'll remember that we talked through their marriage and we're up to their second child being born. Hang on to your seat as we hear the rest of that story and how Soretta, it was a near-death, very near death experience that Soretta had. It's not always easy to listen to. And listen as Joe confronts the idea that the religiosity that he has always lived in, which he's never been happy with, mind you, is confronted by a very real emergency. So let's enjoy the video. Let's watch and listen and see how God works. We're going to come right up at the end of this video to the precipice of God opening up so many doors. So come along, listen to the video, pay very close attention to the end of the video and see what God does, and let it open your eyes and open your heart to maybe what God is calling you to do and you've never thought about it before. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button while you're listening. Hit like. Enjoy yourself, my friend. We'll see you at the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching.
So when I was pregnant with Lily, it was a normal pregnancy.
That's the first one.
That was our second one.
Second one.
Yeah, our
Okay.
first one I was sick for almost 9 months.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And then with Lily, it was normal. I had a baby, but I was pregnant, and as far as I knew, it was normal. We decided to try home birth to see if we could save money. And my due date was the 22nd of July, 23rd of July. And by the 27th of July, I still had not had her. But I had called the midwife. She came out and I said, like, I have this leak, something. And she's like, well, it's probably just a discharge that happens. And she checked me and she said, well, you are so tiny, I think your date is wrong. But she said, I want you to soak in the tub, I forget with what it was, and take X amount of vitamin C. I think it's what it was. And so I did that. And early the next morning, before Joe went to work, I said, I think you need to stay home today. And so he called the midwives. There were 2 of them, and they came out, and it was just a really weird labor. My contractions were, I was walking around, I was talking. Our horse got out while I was in labor, and Joe went and put him in. And then one of my friends had decided, because I'm just not having this baby, we're going to go to the Goodwill that day because it was her birthday. And so at that point, Ella was still at home with us. And we thought, we'll just have the baby and everything will be good. We'll just keep Ella here. And so she came over and she goes, well, I'll just take Ella over to your parents because they just lived a mile from us. So that happened, and then finally, they're like, you know what? You're dilated fully enough. If you want to start pushing, it's up to you. Like, it was just weird. It was not your normal labor. And so then they discovered it was a dry birth because all my water had been leaking out for a while. That's probably another reason why I was tiny, because I didn't have all the amniotic fluid. And so she was born at 10:48 a.m. And then after that is kind of a blur. They went to to get the placenta, they discovered that when they went in, that it was still attached to my uterus. So they were like, they'll go in and try to pull it loose, pull it off, and then pull it out. And so that's what they went to do. They thought they had it loose from my uterus, and they pulled it out. Well, it was still attached to my uterus. So it pulled out my uterus inside out, and I started hemorrhaging, and that's the last I remember.
I didn't understand right away what was happening. I caught on quickly that something wasn't right, but in my mind I was still like, well, everything's going to be okay. But when they started talking in hushed voices, I knew they were wanting to say something that I wasn't able to hear. So I started questioning, what's going on, what's happening. I was still to the point. We had one birth, our firstborn child, and you learn something through that. But growing up, that's another thing that is you just don't talk about under the Amish is how life is created and the things that go with it. So we literally jumped into it not knowing what we're doing. But that's beside the point. I discovered something was wrong. And the pain that she was in, I can't explain it. It's some of it's fuzzy to me, but I knew at that moment that God needs to be more in our life than what it is, and somehow I still knew that everything was going to be okay, but how can I explain it? We called the ambulance. I was freaking out because there was blood. At this time there was blood everywhere, and they're trying to hold everything together and stop the blood flow, and it's not happening. And my wife is unconscious, and they're trying to get her to wake up so she doesn't fall asleep. And they said call the ambulance. So one of them went out, called the ambulance. Well, time moves so slow in a situation like that, and I probably called them every 5 minutes to see where they're at. They finally showed up, and I wanted to go with them. Well, they said, no, you can't do that. You can follow behind us. So me and the baby and the midwife, they had already called in up to the hospital, had the doctor lined up and everything. So as soon as she showed up through those doors, she went straight into surgery. And that's probably what saved her life. I mean, it's God was just watching over all of this.
About in the car.
Yeah. So on the way to the hospital, and in Henry County, the roads are so rough. Even if you're driving in a car, you probably don't want to go really fast. But in an ambulance, and it's like me and the baby and the midwife are following right behind the ambulance, and I'm like, why are they not going faster? Well, in my mind, it's like you need to get to the hospital so they can do something. Well, they were already doing stabilizing her in the ambulance, but on the way to the hospital, the midwife looks in the rearview mirror and looks at me and asks the question. Says, Joe, do you want to pray? And it's like I was like a deer in headlights. up to this point, I had never prayed out of my heart. It was all scripted out of a book, and in German, and yeah, I mean, you do, or I did, growing up. You do talk to the Lord, even if I didn't know Him that well. But to sit there and pray from the heart out loud, like I said, I was a deer in the headlights. Like I finally told her, I don't know how. And that moment really convicted me, like, Joe, why can't you do that? But I had to tell her that I don't know how to do that. And that broke my heart. Like, it really opened it up. And God, I see now that God was showing me that there's more to life than what you're living right now. So yeah, the surgery was successful. It was a long recovery.
For me, when I came to again, I was in the ambulance, and there were 4 guys back there working on me. I was on the board, and my head was down and my feet were elevated, so to keep the blood inside me. They had put an oxygen mask over my face, but at some point I had vomited, and it had went over my forehead and into my hair. And they were, usually they'll have the IV, they're dripping it into you, where they were squeezing the bags. They did everything they could to keep me alive. But I woke up, and I still didn't know what was going on. I had no pain, absolutely no pain. And I wanted to tell them, just take me back. I'm okay now. And I often think in that time when I had no pain, where was I at?
Yeah. That's the thing. I was going to ask you that.
But the thing that bothered me then afterwards when I look back was I didn't even think to pray. That never crossed my mind. And that's what that's the first thing that should come to your mind in an instance like that. But yeah, God saved me from that because He knew that He wasn't finished with me.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, we had another child. We decided we're going to the hospital this time. Because the doctor that did the surgery, we decided we're sticking with him. And we had good experiences with him. And but the same thing happened with the next birth. Not nearly as bad. Everything was ready. The surgery room was prepped. So there was not the wait for the ambulance or the ambulance ride. We were at the hospital. So we could immediately head straight for the surgery room, and things went okay that time. It not compared to the first one.
The first time I lost over 3/4 of my blood. And the second time, while I was at the hospital, I lost half of my blood.
So, from the second child to the third child, how long?
The second to the third,
Yeah.
16 months.
Yeah, 16 months. Wasn't long.
What was God doing in those 16 months?
Well, up to that point, my wife's depression really escalated. So after, I'm guessing it was during that time where you were really in really bad shape, right?
I think it really happened after we had Merlin. Was when it got really bad.
Okay. Yeah, after Merlin. Yes, it was after Merlin that the depression really escalated in my wife, and being she had that much, lost that much blood, and everything just took a toll on her body, I guess. Chronic depression set in, and we had still had our house payments that we were trying to catch up on, doctor bills, and all the other bills that came through from. So I was trying to work out every day. I'd come home. I'd do the best I could around the house, try to keep things in order, and take care of the family and the kids, because at that point my wife really wasn't able to. So the kids learned at a very young age to help themselves to some things. They learned how to make the toasted cheese sandwiches at a very young age. Our oldest was like 4 years old when they started doing it, because my wife was in bed, I was at work. I had no choice. I mean, it was either that or lose the home, and 3 small children in the house, and so yeah, it was a dark time for us. It was tough.
So where was the community? Where was your Amish community?
They helped us some on the hospital bills. And there's a few times that some of them would show up and do some work around the house and property. And looking back, some of it's probably our fault, but we really didn't tell anybody the depth of our struggle, I guess.
Well, I think there again, it goes back to that not showing your emotions, not showing what you feel, and not knowing how to express. And so so the people are not sharing, I'm struggling with this, because it's just not something you really did. And so it just, this person over here is struggling, and we are struggling, and that person is struggling. Well, we're all kind of isolated from each other in our emotions, because we don't know how to.
Yeah, because you said when you talked about going to Muncie, you were one big happy family, and yet you guys are isolated. I mean, nobody noticed what you were struggling with.
And even if they would have noticed, I think it would have been so hard to help, because you don't really know how to.
Oh, yeah.
You don't
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
They don't know what to do either, because they weren't taught what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
Right.
So yeah, that went on for a few years, and I know sometimes I'd just throw myself over the bed on a weekend or whatever, and I'd just cry my eyes out and ask God why. Why are we where we are? It's our finances are in the pot, and my wife can't figure out what's wrong. We knew it was depression, but with that, there's so much that came with that. We didn't know. We would go from doctor to doctor trying to figure out what is wrong. Nobody could find anything, and until we finally discovered it was a few years till we finally discovered it. Everything's stemming from the depression.
And the depression comes from, a lot of it, from oppression. I feel.
That's what was going to be my next question. What was God saying? What were you hearing from God? Were you?
So for me, in that time frame, not really. I was wrapped up in my own world. And I had become so good at building my walls that Joe couldn't get in very far, because I had so many layers built up. And so I think that's why it has been a lot harder for me to find that, I have a connection with God now, but there's still layers that have to come off. because I have built so many layers to protect myself.
And that's what I want to ask and probe a little bit more for the person out there that's listening to this. Had your background, you were the oldest of 12, you were the second mommy, that's the word you used. So had it become ingrained in your mind that I've just got to take care of this. It's up to me.
The depression part?
The depression part, the getting through it, the getting healed. You know, it's just up to me.
Not really.
No?
So, you know, from the mommy part to an actual being a mom,
yeah.
I could not separate that mindset. So when I was the oldest, I was not the mom. I was like a mom, but they still answered to my mom and dad, not to me. And when we got married and we had kids, I carried that mindset over into our marriage with my kids. So I really had to, I'm at the point now where I know that I have authority over my children, but I couldn't find that. I didn't know how to do that. And so not really, I don't really think I felt like I had to fix my depression. I think I just kind of gave up at that point because I had so much stored up in me that there was no outlet for it. You know, I wouldn't call anyone up or write them and say, hey, I'm struggling with, you know, whatever. Could you pray for me? Because I didn't have anyone in my life at that time because we didn't do that. We didn't know to do that.
What made you recognize, you said oppression, what made you recognize, what does that mean to you? Oppression over depression. To be oppressed.
So at that time I would not have known that, but now I know that just because I see where I am free and where I was oppressed at that time by man, you know, in a sense, by rules. Not that we can't be free with it. I mean, after all, you know, I have to follow the law and I can still be free, but it was just the control that was over me. And not just that, but I was always I was always a people pleaser. I still struggle with that one. And so if something happened at church with my family or his family, it became my fault. I carried everyone's burdens on my shoulders. And so I think, you know, with the oppression, being who I was and not opening up to people was too much for me, and I finally just
kind of checked out.
I did. I really did.
But yeah, we kept on searching. We both knew that there's more to life. Then my wife, she became an Avon representative.
That was early on in our marriage.
And that was a God-given movement in our life. I wasn't really on board at that time. Even though with everything that was going on, I was kind of okay with where I was. I didn't really read the Bible, which we only had German at the time. But then my wife's rep, which might be better if you share that.
So my Avon representative was a Christian lady. And I discovered early on when people talk with you, when you're Amish, they assume you're a Christian because they assume that all Amish are Christians, which is not true. Even when you go to church, you know, not everyone there is a Christian. So we would get into these discussions about the Bible, and I would always be very ashamed if an English Christian would talk to me about things of the Bible, and I would just like play along like I knew it, but I didn't. And so she discovered that. So Joe and I, for a while, we had been so desperate to find an English Bible, but we didn't have money to buy one. So we were at Dollar Tree one time, and we bought those dollar little Bibles. well, you can't really read them because they're so tiny. So she discovered that, and she shared part of her testimony with me, and then she said, I'm going to send you my Bible. So her Bible came through the mail to our house. And
Personal Bible.
personal Bible where she had written the notes in it. There were some coffee stains on the pages. And it was just, yeah. So when you asked where was God at, if for me, there's instances like that where I forgot about that. But there's so much, when I look back at that, I see so much darkness. So it's really hard for me I don't remember much of it, I guess. And what I do remember is a lot of it is just darkness. So, yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
So anyhow, during those years with the trauma and the finances, at the same time, we had after we moved to Muncie, we had almost 4 years where things just seemed to flow in the church. Not many issues. Everybody kind of agreed on the don'ts and some do's. But it was all rule based. And then after that, about somewhere in the 4th year, things started going south, so to speak. Their disagreements started rising up in the church, blaming each other for some of the stupidest stuff, and it became a stress just to go to church. And with my wife's depression, adding that on top of it was kind of the last straw.
Anxiety set in for me too, because of the things at church. I just couldn't handle it anymore.
So we stayed for another 4 years. Tried to work through it. Sometimes there was a lull in it where things kind of went okay, but it was a struggle. We'd come home and it was not good. Like hardly any of it was directed toward us, but with everything that went on, and with her depression, it was a lot of it became her fault, because a lot of it involved her parents, and she took it on herself and blamed herself for the troubles that she had no connections with. And anxiety, it became worse, and I knew at that time that all this going on is not pleasing God. It's not biblical, and there's more to life than this. We shouldn't have to come home from a church and be drained. So we started, which we were more in the Word at that time than we were before, but still, I didn't have that personal relationship necessarily. There's, like I said, there's things that happened with her, the second birth, that opened my eyes, but there was no one there to walk with me. So those are things that I just kind of put behind me and as an experience, and I was moving on with life. But as the troubles escalated, we kind of distanced ourselves from the rest of the people, and it came to a point where I had some conversations with some of the leaders and basically told them how I feel, and that if things don't, if this is what church is, if this is what it looks like, I want no part of it. I'm not going to be a part of it. So, which there came a point in her life where she said that, I don't think I'm going to get better until we move out. Which I wasn't on board at first with that, but then we did, and we started visiting different communities. Wrote a couple different leaders in different communities because we wanted to stay in the Amish culture. Nothing seemed to work out, and then we got an invitation to go up to Shipshewana for church at a friend's house, and we went, and everything just kind of clicked, and it's like something told me, this is where you need to be. My wife wasn't on board with that right away. She still wanted to move down south because of, I guess because they were less liberal or something, maybe. I don't know. But we started looking for property here in Shipshewana, and it took us, we went for a full year almost looking for properties. And during that time, we both gained some sort of peace and knowing, and we did search a little bit more during that time too.
Well, and I'm just going to add, so during the time that we started searching for properties, I became pregnant with our youngest one. And so we would come up every week with the kids, and it was a 3-hour drive, almost a 3-hour drive one way. And finally it seemed pointless. Like, why are we even doing this? And as my pregnancy progressed, it was just like, I just don't want to do this. And so I told him, I said, I'm done. I said, if you want to go back and look up properties by yourself, go ahead. But I'm staying home. And it was over that time, it was on Memorial Day, we had been at someone's house to help. And on the way home, I was sitting in the back seat with our kids. And I just remember watching out the window at the sky. I can still see the blueness of it, the clouds. I mean, everything. It was just so beautiful. And I remember looking up into them clouds, and I said, God, what do you want us to do? And he goes, I want you to go back one more time. And so we came home, and I told Joe, okay, I'll go one more time.
Well, that's where we're going to end today's video, and we are going to come back on Tuesday, and we're going to share a very exciting time that Joe and Sara find a home in Shipshewana, and they make their move, and the exciting news that is going on in their life right on up to today. So, did you see Sarah's face light up when she got her friends a Bible? Did you notice what they said? We got a Bible we could read in our own language, and with the notes where God had spoke to the friend. Have you ever thought about that, my friend, when you have been writing in your Bible, that maybe you're not writing those notes for you, maybe you're writing those notes for somebody else? It's a thought. When we first interviewed them, and she shared that with us, Debbie and I have always collected Bibles from Goodwills and resale shops and garage sales where people have written in them so we could read their notes. But it made me think, I've got to keep that in the forefront of my mind when I'm writing in my Bible. My friends, come back on Tuesday. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. Hit the like button if you would, and the notifications button. Leave us a comment in the comment section if you would. We would definitely appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday when we can find hope and find healing together. Thank you, my friends, for watching. God bless.